Hello and welcome to Wait, It Gets Better, the improvisational storytelling podcast where a few friends gather together once or twice a week, sometimes 3 or 4 times a week, and we talk about story ideas. We bring them to you to judge. I'm, of course, Levi.
I'm Reed.
And I'm Seth.
And we're here to tell you a story. Seth, you going to do the recap for last week so we can continue on that story?
Yeah, did you have a name for it, or?
The Guild of Weights and Measures.
Oh, cool.
That's good enough. All right, so in this story, the Guild of Weights and Measures. Last week we had prophecy, magic system, and economic system. For the magic system, Reed told us about... No, not the magic. Levi had the magic system. For the prophecy, Reed told us about kind of the entire world collective having kind of like this shared dream as everything kind of got quieter, the birds stopped singing, and just getting kind of more and more kind of like empty or surreal, and then kind of like waking up from it all, or then having a kind of a large slumber and then wondering if kind of all this kind of shared experience, you know, was kind of like not really understanding how to take it. Is that correct, Reed?
Yeah.
Right.
People first just started having the dreams, and then they just found out when they shared it. Yeah, I did too. And it was like just this common thing, and it went on for like 40 days, and there was kind of a progression, and then it just stopped.
And then for the magic system, Levi told us about, it's kind of like I could say kind of like the Force, where it's like, you know, kind of pushing and pulling, you know, kind of a telekinesis or telepathic.
Yeah.
And there's little bits of this that would kind of like pop up through most of the population. However, most of the population, it's like, you know, patting your head and rubbing your stomach. Most people that can are acquainted with this, you know, they can do one or the other, kind of make objects stop. You know, and that's kind of the most common one, is making things stop in motion.
Yeah.
Or pushing something away from them in motion, or pulling something towards them in motion.
Yeah. And it's relatively...
Few people can... What's that?
It's relatively connected to, like, your will. So, like, the more willful you are, the more powerful you technically can be.
Yeah. And so that's... You know, that's what we got there. Some of the more powerful people can kind of train and do some of both, or some of all three, you know, depending how powerful they are.
Yeah.
And different people, if they've applied this to one thing for their whole life, I think you use like the example of someone who was like pushing air through a bellows for a forge or something. And they've been doing that their whole life, and then turn around, they'd have to retrain to then push other objects, because they've already kind of trained themselves to just push the air through the bellows.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so a person who's really good at pushing air through the bellows can't exactly turn around and like fight with his ability, because that's not like the mindset or where he was at. So you really have to be trained to use it in the way that you're going to, you know.
Yeah, it's an idea. You become what you practice, you know. So if you know,
right,
what you practice, you become. And so if for all those years they've practiced it in one certain place, and it's like they've kind of stretched that muscle, and so that's what's, you know, allowed to be used or able to be used. And that's kind of a basic idea for the magic system. And then for the economic system, I brought in the idea of kind of a this guild that was set up to kind of keep track of the weights, the measures, and kind of the clean and fair dealing between trades, which has kind of, at this point, you know, the monetary system has broken down, and this guild has kind of been this monastic order that is kind of detached from any other governments or any other influences, you know, for the most part. And they kind of relegate, you know, the barter system, you know, so that if someone has, you know, all kinds of eggs, they know the right deal or the right amount to make, a certain amount of eggs over a certain amount of time, or through different, futures market trades, to adequate the different resources needed to pay, let's say, a contractor that might be doing their roof, or, putting fence posts up
Right.
for them, perhaps if they didn't need, eggs, but then it could be, fairly traded or bartered through the,
Right.
the guild system to, even out, but without, direct monetary incentive, but based on, the futures market of produced goods and services that could
Absolutely.
be bartered and traded. So that's kind of where we're set up at. And
Yeah.
then I think we were setting up last time. It's kind of, I think we were saying kind of an alt history where, and we can maybe change it if we want to, but I think where we had left it last week was that it was kind of like an alt history of kind of like coming into the Depression era, which would make sense for like the monetary system to collapse, and
Yeah,
something new to
absolutely.
be set up. And so kind of infrastructure is, 30s, 40s, probably style of, infrastructure and technology, but then mixed with this other, these other systems into there. And then you have, I think, what was it? Elliot is kind of, I guess you say, our main character, who is one of these, guild members, and he is kind of on his maiden voyage to bring about the new set of, and not necessarily new, but, to go
Updated.
through
Yeah.
updating and making sure all the weights, the measures, the, the amounts are all adequated and calculated into the, the official, measurements that they need to be, so that, the barter system can keep, functioning evenly and fairly, over the next year or however long it is that they go and update all these things. And so he's kind of on a, I guess you could say, a journey or pilgrimage, all about like this circuit that he's given to, update, the measures and the weights and the adjustment systems that are used to
Yeah.
make it all happen.
Let's say that if we're going to say an alt Earth, which an alt history, which I really like, let's say that the main hub for this guild monastic order is in Minneapolis.
I like that.
Okay. And so his plan is to travel down what's left of the Mississippi, right? And basically travel down this trade route and kind of update all of the small outposts and the companies around as he travels down.
And the conspiracy theorists say that it's the Norsky Torsky Club in Minneapolis that keeps just pure Norwegian stock, and that they've got a little secret cabal that determines how to quantify all the value. And, no, I'm just kidding. Sorry.
No. Yeah. I don't know what was going on in Minneapolis post-depression. So probably stuff. There was probably things happening.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But-
I mean, I think they had, Minneapolis, St. Paul, and what, Fort Snelling right there.
Yeah.
For all the years, that was kind of the hub where I think it isn't the Minnesota River joins the Mississippi.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what gave rise for it to be what it is because you had kind of the centralized, point for, these two, kind of large natural canals of commerce.
Yeah.
Kind of joining and,
Yeah.
Giving access all the way down to the Gulf, and then.
And it was milling, grain milling and lumber milling using water power. A lot of lumber.
Yeah. Lots of pigs. I know that St. Paul, when it was called Pig's Eye, was like had the biggest livestock yard in America, which the fact that St. Paul used to be called Pig's Eye is just awesome. Anyways, I had unique pet. What did you guys have?
I have anti-hero.
I have famous person.
Well, mine feels like the most simple. Should I go with mine?
Yeah, let's hear it.
Okay. So, just south of Duluth, there was a little tiny farmstead, right? I can't think of any Swedish or Norwegian names. Peter was his name. He had a little farmstead, and this was probably a couple of years before the start of our story. We'll say 10 years before. And he had his little farm, had his cows and his chickens and his pigs and his little garden, and he wasn't much to speak about. He's not the unique pet, but what he did have was a Maine Coon. And this Maine Coon is the cat, right? They're one of the larger sizes of domestic cats. And one of the cool things about them is that they, in fact, have a mane like a lion. They're beautiful cats. You should look them up. They're my dream cat. If I can ever get one, I'm going to get one. But this cat was gray with a darker gray mane. And this cat was a great cat. It would obviously eat mice and rats and snakes and other small birds. Wouldn't touch any of Peter's or any of his families. It was taken care of. He was a yard cat, but he was also considered part of the family. He'd get a saucer of cream on Christmas and New Year's, and their closest approximation to his birthday, right?
Did they let him say grace at Christmas or Thanksgiving?
They didn't,
he was
but
really part of the family.
But they did let him in when it got really cold. Now, they called him Gray because he was gray. Now, Gray is not the unique character. Gray, as it turns out, is a girl. And she, after she was close to the end of her middle ages, shows up pregnant, right? And the family, especially the daughters, Peter's daughters and Peter's wife love this because this just means they get to have a cat for longer, And Gray gives birth to a litter of one, a single cat, also gray, who they name Grayson, as in Grayson, the son of Gray. Now, Grayson is a Maine Coon as well, although he has some wild part of him. They never saw another cat that looked like it could be something that could tangle with Gray. So they're not sure who the father is or was. But Grayson demonstrated very early on that his will was strong enough to affect the real world. In essence, this is the first documented case of an animal possessing the push-pull-stop technique, right? Which made it really dangerous because he was an animal. He couldn't be convinced not to do something.
Especially because he was a cat.
Right. So he grows up, and he grows up and, he's probably 10 or 15 years old. His mom, Gray has died. He's 10 or 15 years old, and the barn burns down. They had a bad year. It's the beginning of the Depression, I'm not sure how much the droughts and stuff that went along with the Great Depression were in Minnesota, but we'll say that they did. And so Peter packs up his family and they're going to move down to Minneapolis, right? He has a brother down there who, has a butcher, and he offered Peter and his family a place to stay, as the things that happened during the Depression. This is one of those type of things. So he sells the farm, and it gets time to leave, and Grayson won't go. He's attached to the land. And so they cry and say their goodbyes and they leave. And so Grayson kind of sticks around the house a little bit till all the mice are gone because there's no more food and, the drought and everything. And so then finally now Grayson has decided to make his way down to the cities. And so he, slinks into another, a caravan or whatever, or hops onto something or travels by foot, right? But he's arriving to the city at the same time, or near the time where Elliot is going to be leaving to go on his journey. So Grayson can push things away from him, but his specialty is he is absolutely silent, and he constantly pulls all air towards him and then pushes it away from him, like up and away from his back. So you can't smell him coming. So he is the size of a Maine Coon. So he's probably 40 pounds, maybe 50 pounds. He's big, if you looked at him, you'd say, ooh, there might be some mountain lion in him. But that's who he is. And I don't know how he's going to talk to the hero or what his place is going to be, but that's who he is.
That's cool.
Yeah. Who's next?
I've got an
What's your
anti-hero.
race?
Let's hear the anti-hero.
Samuel Stone. Samuel Stone's a stonecutter. Son, grandson, great-grandson of stonecutters from as long as anybody can remember. They own a bunch of land, including a hill, a big hill that's almost solid granite, and it's a beautiful red patterned granite that is very sought after.
Nice.
And for generations they've been quarrying this, and that's how they make their living. Sam has one of those rare people that has cultivated the triple threat push, pull, stop, which is really handy in handling big slabs of granite. And when you've got a very stable situation like that, they've got basically obviously not an infinite supply, but enough of a supply of quarryable product that it's not going to run out in anybody's future calculations.
Right.
And they've got a product that is easily quantifiable. They are not threatened by any changes in the guild system because it's so cut and dried, and then they're skilled so that they can, they contract as installers and shippers and the whole thing. But mainly they are masons. They cut to spec, and let's just say Sam he's content and satisfied. He loves hard work. He loves what he's doing. Gets up in the morning. He's on his own land. He's got orders to fill. He's got timetables to meet, and he's a guy. His word is his bond. Everybody who does business with him appreciates the fact that he does what he says he's going to do, and life goes on pretty. Like I say, he's content, pretty self-satisfied, but he was taken by a loop by the dreams, and he was affected really hard by these dreams. And at the end of when the dream stopped, he had kind of an obsession of figuring out how to get to the bottom. So of all this. So he has been communicating with various scientists and anybody who he can get a hold of that has any data about what could have been affecting the dreams during that period. Is there any, our scientists are working on that, ruling out any radiation flood from the sun, or what was there any? Is there any physical? Is there any quantifiable means by which these dreams could have happened, or is it just psychic energy? And if so, is it directed by? It was clear that this was a kind of a dream pattern, that it was almost universal, and so he is just obsessed with the idea that there's got to be something about it, and maybe something he fears, maybe something sinister, but he's on this obsession to get to the bottom of it. And like he had a nice life. He didn't want to have to do anything about this, but he realizes this is something, and he doesn't know what it is, and it upsets the apple cart, and he's going to get to the bottom of it. So that's him.
That's great. I had this kind of like random thought that somehow, so in kind of like a timey-wimey way, if you take the fact that science was pushed forward and people were more on edge after the dream, and that's the same time that this whole economic downturn started. I'd like to see if at the end of the story they get an opportunity to basically send a message back to themselves, which is the dream, which essentially got a bunch of people kind of geared up for the coming struggle as it's kind of been unfolding. And if they hadn't been, the disaster would have been so much worse. So kind of like this guy, what's his name?
Sam.
Sam is trying
Samuel Stone.
Yeah, he's trying to figure out the reason behind the dreams,
Yeah.
you know, and he starts to notice that there are certain elements of it that were so incredibly personal.
Yeah.
Because he, in fact, was sending that dream back to himself, you know? So, like, at the end of the story, it's kind of like this whole, it's like this, everyone take 40 days and, like, reflect on what you have learned. And
Yeah.
I'm wrapping Reed's watching me because we're in the same room, and I'm taking my finger and pushing it and then turning it back. So it's like, reflect on what you've learned, and you use this willpower to reflect, and you literally can tell yourself in the past what you needed to learn. You know, I don't know. I just had this thing as Reed was talking about it, that maybe that's what the dreams are.
Yeah.
After some great and terrible struggle, they go and tell people, this is, you know, from this day to this day, we're going to reflect. And they kind of have to tell the whole world to do it.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know.
I think his initial discovery is that the people that have the strongest capacity for this psychokinesis
right.
Power, the push-pull stop, the stronger you are, the more intense and vivid these dreams were.
Right.
Okay, that makes sense.
I mean, it'd be a fun idea if we want to go with it.
Okay, we'll see.
Reed, what's yours? Seth, what's yours? What's up?
Well, just a comment on all of that. There is, I think that's kind of a neat idea. I know I've like theorized, but an idea that's popped into my head, you know, a while back, was that, you know, conceptualizing the idea of time travel, or, you know, sending a message to the past, and the idea that perhaps, you know, because, you know, many times like, oh man, if only I could like go back and tell myself not to do that, or to do this instead, right?
Yeah.
What if that's our conscience?
Yeah.
What if our conscience is ourselves, finally at whatever point it is, being able to go back and try to dissuade ourselves from doing, or persuading ourselves into doing something else, that from a future standpoint, you know, we might see the better or worse value of something.
Yeah. I don't know all.
And send that message back to us. I don't know. That was just an idea I had. I don't know.
There's a great
few years
movie
ago, but
about a guy that was a ham radio operator. And he's just like, that was kind of for grins and giggles. He would go out, get on the ham radio, and, you know, especially when certain atmospheric conditions were right, he could get people from really a long ways away. And one time he went on, and it was like just serious storms and stuff. And he gets his deceased father from like decades ago, but it's from a freak thing that this connection was made on the radio. And anyway, so this happens over a period of time. Anyway, he tells him he's living in this old house, and then he says, go like into the certain area and open up this one cupboard, and there's a loose board at the bottom, and pull that board up, and he had stuffed some stuff in there that had been there for like, you know, for decades, and it had this message that this really happened, and it was really cool.
Yeah, it's called Frequency.
Frequency, yeah, that's a great movie.
It was good. I've often thought if you're working through something psychologically with your past, you know, I think that time is like outside of time, all things are present. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So if you think about something in your past, you can literally take the lessons you learned today and apply them to your past, and help to treat and fix past trauma by what you know today. You're not just growing today in today's moment, you can actually help to fix past you, which then can retroactively fix all the way up to today.
Cool.
Yeah, I believe in that sort of thing.
Well, you know, that's okay. It's a little, you know, the whole concept of God talking to Moses in the burning bush and said, I am, you know, that kind of eternal present. I am that I am. That notion that God exists outside of time.
Yeah. Seth, what's your story element?
Okay, so famous person, Reg Fiddler. He is the guy that started this monastic order. And I guess, it wasn't quite this way when he started it. He was, let's say, a retired priest, but he had a head for economics. And he wrote a lot of books about different economic systems and how they would work, or how, one thing would rise from another. That kind of was his thing, going back to the historical look on, different things in the feudal system to, the rise of the monetary systems and, how different economic things worked about different things. And something that he then did in his later life was then start all these orphanages, all about the world. And then he would bring in, education to him, which I think is a lot of times what people would do. But he would focus then on his work in, economics and mathematics, and stuff like that. And so when the world started breaking down, some of the people that were familiar with his work, basically brought up, and that's where the guild came from, is, the ideas laid out in like a little booklet that he would have wrote on, like the future of our world and the collapse of the monetary system.
Right.
Where it was a lot of different like theories and how to, run a barter system on the futures, a futures idea, and how to regulate it, outside of a monetary system using, either labor or, goods in an exchangeable rate, based off of, the mathematics and what would have to be in. It basically laid it all out.
Right.
And so when that all started happening, because I know like when the Depression hit, like I know in like, I mean, it was bad here, but I know like in Germany, especially after World War I, like they could wheelbarrow like a whole trailer of money to buy a loaf of bread, right? Like the monetary system had, almost completely inflated and collapsed. Even in the United States and all kinds of the other places, I think during the Depression that, that monetary system, that's kind of was, collapsing. It wasn't the money that you had, although in some places I think it probably helped, but, for the day to day, it was, what you could produce and what you could barter or trade your labor for, a meal or something like that. And so as that started happening, they started looking at, instilling that. And so he's passed on now, but kind of to say who would be the kind of the neutral party, they laid that on the feet of then his, kind of string of monastic orders and orphanages that he had put about the world, or at different hubs and places, to then step up and take that role. And that's where that would have come from.
I kind of like the idea, like the orphans growing up, they are not beholden to clans and families. So they're by definition more likely to be neutral regarding the powers that be.
And you get a lot of control on how they're educated. And so they basically, after a couple of years of kids going through this system, it started to be like, well, what measuring system do you use? Do you use the Fiddler way, or do you use the standard national measurement system? It's like, well, remember that the Fiddler system was rigorously tested in hundreds of different situations and has been found to be much more robust than the national system.
Yeah.
So maybe we will switch over to the Fiddler system then.
I think like the system, it's called, so instead of like consumerism or, that whole idea, or like, I don't know where it would be applied, but it just popped in my head. I picked that kind of randomly, but, now it's like, the buying and selling of things, using the system is called fiddling.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that'd be kind of,
yeah.
It's like I got to go fiddle for a cow. Old Betsy isn't giving milk. And so
Yeah.
that's kind of what I was thinking, like they'll bring his name up as kind of like a, like people would say, oh, by Jove, by Reg, and,
Right.
or,
Well, it's
why
not
don't you fiddle
buy,
me a deal? What's
because
that?
you're not buying, you're fiddling.
No, like it's kind of like by Jove, like, it'd be like, oh my.
Oh, I see what
You've
you're
never
saying.
heard that phrase?
No, I've heard
Buy.
it. I just don't
Okay.
know how it would apply to this.
Bye,
But
cracky.
yeah,
Yeah, it'd be like, not like swearing, but it's like, by Reg and,
yeah, I hear you.
my honor,
Yeah,
yeah, that would be the, the equivalent. But then they'll use his name in the way that they use the monetary system, and inside of his, the guild, he is kind of like the patron saint.
Oh, right, absolutely.
So, but he himself is passed on, but, in the world that it is now, he's, one of the most prominent, well-loved or known figures about the world that is kind of, set up the system that is, move them on into the next, era.
Absolutely. So I think I know who the villain is. The villain is a twofold villain, right? The first part of his villainy is that one of the resources that he deals in is despicable, which is human flesh. So when we look at the removal of coins and instead the insertion of goods and commodities, then this man and his organization deals with the commodity of human beings.
Yikes.
Right?
Yeah.
Because they're, at the end of the day, he'll say they're a commodity. And the other thing that he deals really heavily in is he started out as a casino owner, right? So if you know where this is going, good for you. And then economic downturn started to happen. He had a casino on in Atlantic City. Economic downturn started to happen, and he realized that the stock market moves more money, and they can fix the game much better than what he could fix, than how he can fix his game. So he moves into speculative investment systems, right? Whether that's leveraged investment systems, and this is all pre-collapse, right? So heavily into credit systems in order to get people to invest their time and money and energy into his speculative short selling, just the kind of investment where there actually isn't any product moving. It's just guessing. It's just a casino, basically. But it's all very wrapped up nice and tight, as if it was sort of, it's all legal, he says. But the question is does he take advantage of people? And the answer is yes. So then after the collapse and fiddling became sort of the name of the game, it kind of ruined a lot of his business, And so now he is trying to find ways to manipulate the weights and measures of things in order to sort of get back into it. He's trying to find some ways to throw the markets off balance. If he can have two separate reports come in from fiddling agents that say two different things as far as weights and measures, then that'll throw distrust onto the futures markets, which will allow him to sort of, move things around.
Okay.
He's always willing to bet, wherever he shows up, whether it's your life or your farm, The thing he loves the most is what he calls the true currency, which is basically demoralizing a person and destroying their life so much that they owe him everything. And so he essentially takes them and, they become his personal property, what he calls the true currency. Bad guy, bad villain, very bad villain, but kind of diametrically opposed to Fiddler completely, brilliant brilliant at statistics, brilliant at human beings and the sort of the social systems that exist and how humans display value. Really good at setting up, really good at inviting people into loophole systems where they think they're going to get value out, but instead they're there just to provide value for him.
and completely sucked into the system where they have, they load 16 tons, and what do you get?
Exactly.
Another day older, but
Yeah,
deeper
company
than that.
stores. That's like a thing that
Yeah.
he believes in.
St. Peter, don't you call me, for I can't go. I owe my soul to the company store.
Yeah. Sylvester is his name. I've just decided. So here we have an interesting story. I think that next week we will try and tell the story. We've talked about a lot of themes, about how a lot of things will go. I think next week, if we just spend it on saying the beginning, the middle, the end, how these things kind of wrap into each other and how the story goes. Does that sound good with everybody?
Sounds great to me.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for this episode of Wait, It Gets Better. If you like this episode, send us a message on Twitter at GetsBetterCast, or send us an email at waititgetsbettercast@gmail.com. If you didn't like this episode, send us a message at waititgetsbettercast@gmail.com. And don't forget to wait, because it gets better.